Like this.
कुछ नहीं.
नहीं सर यहाँ.
Thank you. So, इसको आपका मैं बीच में डिस्कस किया है.
क्योंकि मुझे
Hi.
हेलो हाउ आर यू
Good.
हाउ आर यू Nice to meet you.
आइए. हमारे वक्ता लोग बैठे.
मैं आपकी
हम
बात सुन रहा था.
ठीक ठीक.
और सब ठीक है.
बस ठीक ठाक.
आपके जोड़ीदार चले गए. आपके जोड़ीदार चले गए.
क्या हेलो. Time. I said I came back from Bombay in time.
No, I'm going to Bombay tomorrow. There is a conference meeting at Jahangir Gallery.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਮੋਸਟ ਹੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਡੇ. Have any Paris connection? Like Ram Kumar. Yes, I did actually, but not officially.
Not officially. Oh, I see.
I went a number of times.
Clandestine.
Yeah. I went many times, and I stayed. I think the longest I stayed was over a month with Raza actually.
Starting to
very good.
paint right from 89 onwards from Paris to
अब तो संचालक.
now. And he was one person who somehow
Did you remember?
Bindu appeared in 70s.
Actually, yeah, no. Actually, he starts with this.
Even though, he had reached a point where, living was as
Hi, Raksha. Hi.
can be. Our friendship.
Yes. We'd go on for the whole night as I used to with him. Yes.
One teacher.
One of my prominent. भैया को मैंने सुना कि वो
Social service. Long time. You had a all round. Yeah, but you're the baby of women.
No.
I painted a portrait of her.
अस्पताल में भर्ती कराना पड़ा जिस दिन उनका जन्मदिन था, 94वां जन्मदिन। उसके पहले वो ये छोटा चित्र बना रहे थे, और वो जो चित्र आप देख रहे हैं वो 2016 में ही बनाई हुई उनकी चित्रकृति है। लगभग 5 महीने वो बीमार रहे, और उनकी इच्छा थी कि मंडला में, जहाँ के एक गांव में उनका जन्म हुआ था, अपने पिता की कब्र के बगल में उनको दफनाया जाए। उन्होंने एक बार गौरबियों में, जब हम लोग कुछ लोग गए हुए थे, ये कहा था, अपनी एक खाली कब्र दिखाई थी और कहा था कि अगर मैं फ्रांस में न रहूं तो जानीन उनकी पत्नी के बगल में जो कब्र उनके लिए सुरक्षित थी वहां दफन किया जाऊं, और अगर भारत में हूं तो अपने पिता की कब्र के बगल। तो एक कब्र गौरबियों में खाली है। उनकी जीवन लीला को बचाने की हर कोशिश की गई, और अंततः डॉक्टर आईसीयू में 2 महीने से अधिक वो आईसीयू में थे। डॉक्टर कहते थे कि इनके जीने का कोई शारीरिक आधार नहीं बचा है, पर अगर ये फिर भी जीवित हैं तो इसलिए कि इनकी जिजीविषा अदम्य है। और आप जानते ही हैं कि उन्होंने एक तरह की कला अपनी विकसित की, जिसको अपने आशयों में, अभिप्रायों में कॉस्मिक ही कहा जा सकता है। वो एक वैकल्पिक आधुनिकता थी जिसमें समरसता, शांति, लय, संगति की खोज थी, बजाय विघटन और विखंडन और विकृतियां इत्यादि इत्यादि जिनसे हम घिरे हैं, और इस समय तो कुछ ज्यादा ही घिरते जाते हैं। असल में रजा के यहाँ कई द्वैत हैं। उनमें बहुत ही सशक्त आत्मनिष्ठा है, लेकिन दूसरों की बड़ी चिंता है। उनमें वैभव है रंगों का, लेकिन बहुत विनयशीलता है। उनमें आभिजात्य है, लेकिन साधारण की महिमा का भी स्वीकार है। उनमें जीने और रचने के बीच जो दूरी थी वो उनके अंतिम चरण में तो लगभग समाप्त हो गई थी। वो जीने के लिए रचते थे और रचने के लिए जीते थे, कोई और कारण उनके जीने का जैसे नहीं रह गया। उनकी कला संसार से अनुराग और संसार के प्रति आभार की भी कला है। वो बहुत आभारी थे, और सारी जिंदगी उनको लगता रहा कि उन पर कर्जा है, पता नहीं किसका, और वो लगातार उसको जैसे चुकाने की चेष्टा करते रहे। कोई और कलाकार संभवतः नहीं है हमारे बीच जिसने युवा कलाकारों, कवियों, संगीतकारों, नृत्यकारों की इतनी दिल खोल कर जब नाजुक मौके पर मदद की, क्योंकि वो अपने कठिन संघर्ष को कभी भूले नहीं थे। ऐसे मतलब यूं तो ऊंचे थे, लंबे, लेकिन सिर्फ कद में ऊंचे नहीं थे, सिर्फ अपनी उपलब्धि में भी ऊंचे नहीं थे, वो दिल में भी बहुत ऊंचे थे। और तरह तरह के, मैं इतने प्रसंग है कि उनको सुनाना नहीं चाहता क्योंकि ये मौका नहीं है। उन्होंने जो रज़ा फाउंडेशन बनाया उसके पीछे भी ये धारणा थी कि मुझे कला से जो पैसा मिल रहा है उससे जो मेरे जीवन यापन के लिए ज़रूरी है वो तो मैं खर्च करूं और बाकी सब दूसरों पर खर्च किया जाए, क्योंकि दूसरों की ज़रूरत है। ये एक अद्भुत उदाहरण है। उन्होंने अपनी वसीयत में भी सब कुछ अपने बाद रज़ा फाउंडेशन को दिया है। ये भी एक अद्भुत दान है। वो एक बहुत छोटे, जिस बाबरिया में उनका जन्म हुआ था उसमें उस समय कुल 8 घर थे और बड़ा मार्मिक था कि वहाँ से 3-4 लोगों का एक समूह बाबरिया की मिट्टी लेकर आया था। इस मिट्टी को उनको दफन करते समय मंडला की मिट्टी में मिलाया। एक उक्ति है कबीर की, खलक चबैना काल का, कुछ मुंह में कुछ गोद, कि हम लोग सब काल के चबैना हैं, वो खा रहा है, कुछ गोद में रखा हुआ है जिसको खा लेगा, लेकिन कुछ को भी खा रहा है। लेकिन ऐसे लोग भी हैं जो कालजयी होते हैं, जिनको काल भौतिक रूप से भले नष्ट कर दे, लेकिन जिनको वैसे वो कभी परास्त या नष्ट नहीं कर पाता। और मेरा ये पक्का भरोसा है कि सैयद हैदर रज़ा उनमें से एक थे। ये उनका अंत नहीं, उनके अनंत का आरंभ है।
and a lot of argument and everything else. In the morning, a letter arrives from his neighbor, which says, I'm very happy that you were so happy last night, but I am a very hard-working man, and I really do enjoy my night's rest. Perhaps you could exercise a little more tone control in your merriment. Signed, yours sincerely, so-and-so, the butcher of horses. So Raza showed me this letter. So I promised to control my laughter. And I laughed more when I saw his letter, that he had this great friend of his who was a butcher of horses, you know. So Raza framed this letter and put it up in his, in his room. So, I mean, this came to me just when I remembered this when I saw Ashok's little notice saying, you know, don't exceed 5 or 7 at the outside, you know. So I'm going to try and do that. Raza was very fond of quoting Modigliani to me, and he said, with great passion, "Un vi brave me entos, short life but an intense one." Lost that, not even to the last. As the Ashok has pointed out, I mean, that's probably the blessings or the curse of being an artist, I suppose, that you just go on working, and he went on working, not like a slave horse, but changing. And this was one of his, I think one of his greatest qualities was his assessment and his reinvention of himself. Because I recall the time when I first met him in Bombay, he was doing watercolors, and which he did when he went up to Kashmir. He came down with a bundle of these things. People were very happy with these things. He sold them and so forth. And then what possessed him thereafter was the actual business of form. Now these were, nice, sentimental, very pleasant pictures which he'd done. He had a sense of color which was innate. But what was really lacking right then was the formal quality of a work was missing, and he worked at that. And in fact, when he did a show which indicated this direction, which was then fulfilled much later when he went to Paris. And it was not long after he'd been there with Raza and Akbar Padamsee. They had the show at a gallery in Gallery Cruise, if I remember the name right. And his work was, I wouldn't say a throwback, but it took a lot from the miniatures and the miniature traditions, not only the Pahari or the Mughal, but in toto. For instance, he believed, for instance, which is very available in these paintings which I'm talking about, is the hashia, the border. The border becomes a part of the painting, and it's not just a sort of a general accoutrement to the whole thing, but it becomes an integral part of what he was saying. The color, everything had to be matched. Moreover, then the lines, etc., there was a certain, the quality he had, which he never lost, even when he went to a very free-flowing form with his brush later on, was his sense of composition, his sense of direction, his sense, he snapped down and he didn't dither at all. And these drawings, these paintings which he showed at Gallery Cruise were just that. He sold every single one of them, excepting one, which I later on bought. He needed the money to send one of his proteges to London, and he didn't have money. He said, well, and this was when his scholarship was finishing in Paris. And I just returned from London. I had a little money with me. I'd had a show there. And so he said, he had this young fellow staying with him who would come from Bombay to be with Raza and to study under him. Well, so he said, I'm sending him to my brother Ali Imam in London, and I need a little money, but I can. So I said, yes, okay. How much is it? How much is the travel? He said, oh, it's 20 pounds, 20 pounds. So I gave him 20 pounds. And so as the day wore on, towards the evening, he said, हाँ चलो यार, अच्छा खाना खाएं कहीं. So off we went. Janine, he wasn't married then, but Janine joined us, and so the three of us were there. And he splurged the 20 pounds on this dinner, including having a bottle of a good wine rather than the postillon which he was sort of used to in his poorer days, And that was just him. I said, well, what about sending manual? He said, yes, we'll find another way. It was quite, and he did. He managed to get manual across to his brother. He was generous to the extreme. I remember when I was going to London to have a show, he gave me a list of people who would be potential acquirers of work of art. So I was very happy. I've asked quite often here, people, they hide their lists and put them in their pockets. There's such secrecy about everything. But it wasn't so within us, or with them, at that time, maybe with everybody else. But certainly he provided me with a list which proved extremely useful in the end, I did sell some pictures to those very people who bought his work. Um, um, the other thing that comes to my mind is a wonderful show that Bal Chhabra in Bombay put up. Bal had a gallery, he'd taken a gallery at the Vallabhbhai Desai Institute, and Raza was coming, and he said, well, why don't we have a nice show? And 6 of us were invited. Now, I was in Madras at the time, and so I flew up for the show. I had 4 or 5 paintings, we all had about that. And then Raza came, and we were pricing these pictures. Ramesh Thapa, I was staying with Bal, and Ramesh Thapa came, and it was in his very dictatorial, friendly, loving manner. He says, what are your prices? So I said, oh, 700, 800, which seemed like a lot of money in those days anyway. So I said, double them. So I said, no. He said, well, Raza's pictures are 1,600. How can you be showing at this price? You'll be thrown out. So, very reluctantly and with being very timorous about it, we sort of raised the prices, you see. And it sold. And there was a little animosity amongst some of us, I won't quote names here right now, but saying, like this guy comes from Paris and he's pricing these pictures, these watercolors at 1,600, and look at us, and we are only sort of 800, 900 category. And I won't price my pictures at all. I'll price them at 5 rupees each, So I said, well, I'll buy all 5 of yours at 5 rupees each, to which I was relegated to the dustbin and so on. Anyway, the show was a great success. Everybody sold. Everybody was happy. The press was very, very kind and extremely good. And we celebrated that evening at Bal Chhabra's, which was we called it, his flat was known as the 7th Heaven because it was on the 7th floor. And it was a very wonderful place. And so we went there. And then the lyrics started, I think by Raza. He says, hi, aaj kya ho gaya? So he says, lota ulta ho gaya, paisa khota ho gaya, hi, aaj kya ho gaya? So this is the big leap into pricing at that time. Everything went double, see. We were all madly happy, and lota, ulta or not, it was very, very exciting. Now, what I'm trying to say is that there was this great desire for jubilation at things too, For instance, he, along with the others, along with Hussain, Gaitondi and so on, they were all urging me to quit my job. Now, I had a very good job, it was very nice, I had a family and so on. And I said, yes, in time I'll give it up. No, he said to me, ye bank ko chodo, hum apna bank kholenge ek. I said, okay, when the time comes, it'll happen. And indeed, when I did resign, Bal, Hussain, Gaitondi, Tayyab, he was in town. We had a great party in Bal's house. And similarly, on the same night, Raza had a party in Paris. He called the Indian painters and so on to celebrate my release, as they called it, from Mammon. And and I still have that invitation card which they sent out. But this was the kind of amity, friendship, love that existed between us. I hope I'm not exceeding 5 minutes.
You are.
Okay, one more thing is, when he got the Prix de la Critique, which is a very important, it was probably, I think, the first time that somebody who was non-French got this award. And he got it, of course, we were all very happy. And this was a meeting which was organized, actually, in the Jahangir Art Gallery at the time. And Sarkozy Jahangir actually announced, he said, I have some very good news for you. You know? And he gave this news that our Raza has got the Prix de la Critique. And believe you me, I've never seen this happen again. Everybody stood up and there was a clapping that wouldn't stop. People were thrilled. And I think this kind of thing is very endearing, and I think it really only happened in Bombay. It couldn't happen. It only happened that once, actually. I can't remember it happening again and again. But that's it. One little thing before I finish, since I'm exceeding my time. He wasn't married. He was going out with Janine. This was at the City University. I was staying there with him in a separate room, of course. But he says to me, I'm going out to dinner with Janine. So I said, yeah, carry on. He says, can you amuse yourself? I said, yeah, sure, I can amuse myself. I was in his studio at the time. He just started to paint a picture, which was of a figurative picture of a sort of a nude waist, and holding a hare or something like that, in yellow and greens and blacks. So he says, finish it for me. So I said, okay, I'll finish it for you. So whilst he went off with Janine, I got down to his easel and I finished this painting. And then he said, well, since you've done the major part of this painting, I suppose it belongs to you. So it did. And I passed it on to another friend who was there at the time, who's right here today, Prantalvar. He owns that painting. I gave it to him, it passed on. This is just one of the few things that ever happened. I could go on and on. But I personally feel a great personal sense of loss. One thing more, which is quite amazing actually. When I first went to Paris with him, he said, so what shall we do? What would you like to see in Paris? I said, well, of course, as a painter, I'd like to go and see the Louvre. He said, yes, of course, you come with me. So we went. And at the gate he says, okay, now do as I tell you. I said, okay. He said, hold my arm and shut your eyes. I said, well, that's a hell of a good way to see paintings, isn't it? So he said, do as I tell you, just shut your eyes and just follow me. And we went. He passed me through all sorts of chambers and little rooms and big rooms and so on, until he came to one little room. And he says, okay, you can look up now, you can look. And there right in front of me was Pieta de Avignon. And it was spellbounding. It really was. We sat there for half an hour or more looking at just this one painting, which is still stuck. Now, and when we were going out, he said similarly, he said, now shut your eyes and hold my hand. He said, you mustn't see anything else. And that's the way to see a painting. I mean, the real way to see a painting, and I've shown that, The thing that emerges from this experience actually is the important thing was the painting. Nobody knows who painted it. I mean, somebody painted it, obviously, but the identity is not known. Nor does it really matter, because the identity or the value of the identity is embodied in the work itself. And I think behind this kind of thinking was Raza trying to tell me that this is what matters in art anyway. Personalities, everything else, socializing and all this is very immaterial to what actually is the worth of a painting. And that's ultimately what stands and what one looks at. And if I dare to say it, I think this is how we look at Raza now, because he's embodied in just these works, small or big. I mean, he gave my wife a little thing about that big, but it's still very important and still very nice. Thank you.
I think after Christian, mine will seem short anyway.
Sorry, I was so long.
No, you have to. The passing away of Raza is a matter of considerable loss in the public domain, but also for many individuals. For instance, for me, it was with Raza that I got imbibed some of my important lessons. Important lessons in art practices. Raza would get up and sometimes just get up, pick up a brush and show, how with a flick or two of paint on the canvas, the entire face of the painting would change. He belonged to that grand generation, which could spend time in art discourses without hurry or impatience, and with genuine humility and grace. The charm, the tehzeeb, the lihaz, this will never come back. The suave, urbane, handsome artist had to suffer considerable difficulties. Ashokji spoke about some of them, but he faced them with a lot of courage, optimism, fortitude. His modest beginnings in a small village, Barbaria, and later Mandla, where his father was a forest ranger, his subsequent departure for Nagpur to study art, and then to J.J. School of Art in Mumbai, which could not, where his admission could not take place, and his life of very stringent means when he worked in a blockmaker's studio in the city to earn a living, these are well known. But few are aware that even as he worked with his fellow progressive artists to pave the course that modern Indian art would take in a newly independent nation, he suffered great personal despair. The elation of independence had been dismantled by the ravages of the partition. And for Raza, it led to extreme isolation as his family members decided to leave for Pakistan. He said, "In July 1947, my mother died in my house in Bombay. Early next year, in 1948, father passed away in Mandla. Painful decisions had to be taken. My brothers, all four of them, and my own sister decided to leave for Pakistan because the climate in Damoh and in Delhi for my eldest brother had become unbearable. Linked up with this period of riots and killings and hatreds, there was my private history and my personal sense of loss. But rooted as he felt in India, he decided to stay on, and his syncretic vision would lead to paintings of great subliminal heights. He worked in this blockmaker studio, and in his spare time he would make paintings from the view from the window. And even then they had something special about them. They were noticed, and soon he was to join the Progressive Artist Group, which is, as we all know, a seminal group in the formation of modern Indian art. But in the formative years, the artists had hard lives and struggled to survive with great paucity of means. They lived in small, congested spaces and traveled long distances to meet at the seafront or a chai shop to have discussions on art and pave the course it was to take in the country. Raza left for Paris in 1950, and he went for a couple of years, but he stayed for several decades. He met Janine and continued to live and paint there, and he made dents in the international art world. But they lived initially in a very modest way, in 3 rooms without a bathroom, where he would invite fellow artists like Krishan Khanna to come and live with him. He was also very warm and hospitable to Ram Kumar, Akbar Padamsee, Souza, and several others in Paris. Raza was to engage with the School of Paris and derive paintings of great chromatic intensity. But it was clear that his heart was in India, for when he made a breakthrough in his art, influenced to some extent by artists like Jackson Pollock and Mark Rothko, during a residency in 1962 at Berkeley University, it was with fluid gestural strokes, latent with memories and colors of home. In a masterly painting like Ma, for instance, we have flaming tongues of color on one side, counterpointed by a black still center on the other, and with the evocative lines written in Devanagari, Mother, when I return home, what should I bring? In many works, we see the influence of the splendid colors and movements of the miniatures of Mewar and Malwa, which bring the searing sensations of his land. As Raza's works became fluid and resonant with memories, his thoughts traveled to the still black center, which he had encountered as a child, first shown to him by his teacher Nand Lal Charia, in an effort to contain his restless energy. And so the Bindu emerged, paintings with black concentric circle pulsating with radiant light, where the mother of all colors, black, gives birth to the sumptuous reds, yellows, and blues, reflected in its rotating orb. The germination followed, where the seed is like the womb of the earth, containing within it an unlimited potential for growth. Whirling concentric circles in vibrant colors became metaphors for sea, sky, and earth. As triangles, spheres, and discs germinated, there could be no looking back for the artist. Divya Shaktiyon ke bina chitra nahi bante, Raza felt. Without the intervention of divine energies, works of art don't get created. Raza was now a far remove. His prices fetch crores, and he's a far removed from those early days. But he remained unmoved by all this, and he continued to work. And it must have been, Ashokji talks about it, it must have been some divine force within him which made him work continuously, day after day, as frail as he was, till the last hour of hospitalization. Today, when he's no longer with us, we are left with his priceless legacy in art. The Bindu reverberates, the still center of the universe, both emanating energy and containing its restlessness. And what could be a more precious gift from the artist? Thank you.
Relationship with Raza Saab for about 25 years now. And in his last 2 months in the hospital, I was going almost 3, 4, 5 times a week. My colleagues, Sonia was sitting there, Mrs. Nigam, Punji was sitting there, Satish was sitting there. They were all going to the hospital voluntarily. I never told them to go to the hospital. The day before he joined the Stars, Sonia came up to me at lunchtime and said that I've just come back from the hospital. He doesn't look very good to me. And she said that you must come in the evening with me again. So we went again, met with Ashokji and Sanjeev, and for the first time our faces were a little long. The hope was disappearing a little. फिर भी मन में ये सोचा सांस है तो आस है. And not surprisingly, Ashokji called me up the next morning to say that I've got some bad news. The very next morning, Dilip Gaonkar called me up to say, Arun, we lost a friend. Thereafter, there was about half a minute or 1 minute silence, as if to pay homage to Raza. I interrupted and said that way back in 91, 92, when I used to visit Raza, Raza used to mention your name. He said I went on a scholarship to Paris and I used to visit him. And I liked a particular painting, which was 400 francs at that time. He mustered his courage for the next 4, 5, 6 days and asked Raza Sahab that can he buy this painting. Raza Sahab said, yes, of course you can buy this painting. He said, but I can pay only 50 francs a month. Raza said, even then you can buy this painting. So that was the generosity of the artist. He may not be with us, he may have joined the Stars, but he is still living in the hearts of each person sitting in this room. Each person who has known him, each person who has owned his painting, and each person who has ever had any dialogue with his work or he as a person. This is about the late 90s that he was very generous to me, I must acknowledge. Late 90s that we were to go out for lunch and I told Raza that I want to see you painting. The painting you are giving it to me later tomorrow. I went there, he was painting what he was to paint for me. Sat there very patiently, saw his earth colors moving around in the canvas in a very fascinating way. And then the studio was filled up with papers here, canvases there, books there, and all kinds of litter all around. Incidentally, he used to recite a lot of Urdu poetry because I was a keen listener to that. And I would write down, but he would insist that he would write down because he said, Arun, तुमको तो मात्रा ही नहीं लगानी आती. यहाँ लगानी होती तो वहाँ लगा देते हो, वहाँ लगानी तो यहाँ लगा देते हो, तो मैं ही लिख देता हूँ. खैर, तो मैं कह रहा साहब जब आप तक पेंट कर रहे हो और लंच टाइम का भी वक्त है थोड़ा, मैं आपका कमरा थोड़ा ठीक ठाक कर दूँ. मैंने कहा कुछ नहीं, एक झाड़न दे दो, मैं बुक से कायदे से रख देता हूँ और सब कुछ कायदे से रख देता हूँ. तो उन्होंने कहा कि इन्हीं बिखरे हुए इमाइयों में मेरे खुशियों के लच्छे हैं, मुझे पागल ही रहने दो कि हम पागल ही अच्छे हैं. तो मैंने कहा राजा साहब लिख दीजिए आप, क्योंकि मेरे को तो लिखने नहीं दोगे आप. कह रहे लिख दूंगा मैं, चलो लंच के लिए चलते हैं. मैं कहा सर लिख तो लो ना, फिर भूल जाओगे आप. कह रहे शाम को वाइन का पीने के लिए आ रहे हो ना, मैं लिख दूंगा. आई वॉज गेटिंग ए लिटिल इम्पेशेंट. Anyway, we went for lunch, came back, I rested, he rested. went in the evening, a glass of wine, and he gave me a canvas which was 20 inches by 20 inches. And below that it is written, इन्हीं बिखरे हुए मायों में खुशियों के लच्छे हैं, मुझे पागल ही रहने दो कि हम पागल ही अच्छे हैं. And he presented that to me. And I see that painting every day as it is in the entrance of my house. So his generosity was amply shown. Ashokji has already mentioned his generosity towards Raza Foundation and his generosity towards nearly everyone he knew. He will always be remembered for his work. He will always be remembered for whatever he has done in his life. But what we will miss him for is his generous nature. In the end, I would like to commend Sanjeev and his team for their dedication, love, and reverence towards Raza, which made him live for many, many months more than he would have. He did a commendable job, and of course, Ashokji was very patient, and as was our gallery, but hats off to the person. Thank you.
I'm being asked as a, let's say, not previously listed speaker to join in the tributes which we are all paying to this man who had very exceptional qualities. My contact with him goes back to Paris days. You know, he went on a scholarship, I also went on a scholarship, and what is more, we lived in the same hostel, Maison de Provence of the France. He had a room right at the attic of it. It was a top floor, and I recall, you know, as a scientist, I used to be late in returning, and frequently, you know, in between two experiments there were hours available. So many equipment at Pasteur Institute were in limited quantities, limited numbers, and you know there was a line of people who would, you have to put your name down, and your turn came with certain delays of sometimes several days. But you see, I noted that after 5 o'clock, nobody works, so all instruments are available. So my working hours were started at noon, and they continued in between, you know, not only the dinner, but also one had to spend some time somewhere, which gave me an opportunity to enjoy the French culture. You see, as students, you used to get tickets for nothing, literally nothing. You know, they have a system in France to encourage the young people to go to various cultural performances, and you know you could have those for nothing practically, you know, not even less than a meal, so to say. And usually they were the unsold front ranks and very good seats in the opera or wherever, in many theaters and so on. So I used to come late, and when I used to see his light burning, I recall that I would go up, because you see these were the years when his scholarship had finished. And you know, the artist, even a big artist like him, doesn't get saleable, or not in him, but let's say his work doesn't get saleable, and you know, one has a very hard period in between. And Raza was passing through one of those hard periods where, his scholarship was no more, and his paintings obviously were selling in small numbers. So I used to insist, Raza, I am so hungry, I haven't eaten. We must eat. So let me tell you that even he used to starve himself, but he would not let his work suffer. He was a very dedicated, devoted person. And as you see, there is a dynamism, not only in his colors, which are immediately attractive, but even that last painting that he did, look, it's flying out. It's flying out. There is a movement in it. So there are qualities which are so rare. And I think we are so lucky that India produced an artist of his caliber. And I think that is what will live. Everybody who comes has to go one day. But because of his outstanding work and contributions, his memory will never fade. So I raise my hand and ask all of you to join in a tribute to this very unusual and exceptional and very generous man. The painting that he jointly did, he and Raza and this is a unique painting started by Raza and finished by Krishan Khanna. It hangs in my room. And it goes everywhere where I go. Also, when I was going from France to Germany, he gave me a gouache, a really pretty, lovely gouache of that period. Something which is so outstanding. And his generosity of a painter who, is not so yet arrived in terms of money, to part with his work for a friend just as a souvenir. I think these are the type of souvenirs which will last our lives. And somebody asked me, a huge price was being offered to me. I said, never. Never will it leave my room till I am alive. They will live with me, which means the works of Raza, of Krishan Khanna, and of so many artists who have been my friends. As a scientist, we are also poorly paid, so we don't have crores to buy their works. But how lucky are we to see that such artists, whom we admire sincerely, can also enrich our surroundings with their outstanding work. So you see, as I say, that everybody who has come has to go, and he has gone. But let's not, now feel sorrow for that. We can do nothing. What we need to remember is that here is a man whose work will live forever. God bless his soul.
So much has been said by Raza Saab's close friends, people who have known him for so many years, and I have a very severe throat problem, so I hope you'll bear with me. I felt I had to come and pay my homage to Raza. Raza Saab was really an extraordinary person, extraordinary artist. I would begin first by thanking the Raza Foundation and Videra Art Gallery. Can you hear me? For bringing us together this evening to pay homage to Raza Saab. He was truly remarkable. A man who lived fully and I'd like to add, with full purpose of life. This has been said in many ways this evening. His contribution will long outlive the years of this lifetime, his lifetime. Yes, he formed a vision of how to perceive and how to express the significance of the world in which we live, of the life energy which we breathe and which sustains us. This is, I think, what I really want to talk about, life energy. And I would like to link it. I was asked by Ashokji to speak about his work, and I'm glad to speak to you about his work because I think I owe him a tremendous debt of gratitude. It was Raza Sahab who, like for Yashodhara, in a sense inducted me into writing. I owe my debt to Raza Sahab for coming to see me when I was editor at India International Center, for choosing me as a writer, inviting me to France to visit him, which I did for 3 years running in the late 80s, and asked me to write a book on him. 3 consecutive years in the late 1980s spent visiting Raza and his wife Janine for maybe 9-10 days at a time in their summer space in Gorbio. 3 years of discovery and sharing with Raza his excitement in nature and life. In a sense, this book changed my perceptions and how I looked at art from then on, because it was no longer a game. Remember, I'd been art critic for the Times of India. It was no longer a play of words, it was serious stuff. It had to bring forth meaning, as did his art. And isn't that the aim of our art? To hold meaning which will persist, which grows with time. This, I think, happens with Raza's work. Well, anyway, the 1980s were his years of discovery, the time when I got to know him, a turning point in Raza's work. He was moving away from the gestural painting which has been described, done earlier in France, and also when he visited California briefly in 1962. When I watched him work in the patio outside his summer studio in Gorbio, I realized that the best of Raza's work grew then from deep inner silence, inner solitude, from introspection, from meditation. Raza never described his work, never would describe his work as spiritual. He referred to them, when I once interviewed him, as significant form, taking it from his years of training in France on the essential aspect of form itself. What is this form? What is this form that I'm talking about? It's reaching into the essence of things. He was searching for how this could be done. A quote from him, I think, would do it. He said in 1993, "By very simple means, I'm convinced one can attain infinity." That's what he wanted to do with his work. He wanted to get to a point where it would be infinitely beyond time, infinitely beyond space. And that is something that I think, in a sense, he has achieved. That it became formula is, in a sense, sad, and I must say that. But I think we have to follow him in the years of discovery, in the years when he was really discovering the time of... I watched him plant seedlings in pots in Gorbio and watched them grow. 5 days later, these seedlings were pushing out shoots. And he was really excited. He said, "This is life. This is the process of life." I would like to quote him in one little quote, which again comes from something that he said. He said, "It's strange that I needed 40 years to understand my passion and love for nature." Let's remember that he had always painted. Gatonde mentioned when he had been an associate with him. He said, "Raza painted only landscapes. but to understand his passion, his love for nature, and to transpose this on canvas. Painting is something alive as human beings in its different manifestations. It is a vital process of becoming. Just imagine how fascinating it is that the seed contains the inherent forces of a plant, of animal life, and so on. And that could be the same process in form too. This is not merely form. The amazing thing is that by truly remarkably returning to the use of the circle, the square, the triangle, the use of horizontal lines and diagonals, Raza was able to bring together, to coalesce into one whole, the best of Indian tradition as well as of his years of training on form in Paris. By using these forms, he was abstracting the essence of life, recognizing them to be pure forms to represent the universe. He had turned from early watercolors of landscapes to deeply influenced by Cézanne's landscapes of Provence to the inner essence. His concept of nature now was grounded on basic principles, conceiving of the earth, water, sky, fire, and Akash as an integral part of our lives, indeed of ourselves. There was a certain time when he was turning to these that he actually named them as la terre or water, and there were many others. He actually returned to the elements and then went further into abstraction. So I have often wondered what he meant about the significance of form. What did he mean? What is significant form? To come to India again, we need to recall that in India the use of symbols is sanctified in an ancient language of visual abstraction. Geometric symbols, yantras. The power diagram by which the physics and metaphysics of the world are made to coincide with the psyche of the mediator. Unquote. It is generally believed that these yantras are used in tantric practice. But in fact, I discovered that yantras formed, I didn't discover, but as we know, yantras form the basis of texts used by traditional Shilpins. When I was writing my book on Raza, which was really remarkable, I came upon a text in Sanskrit in Banaras when I was sitting and writing it. It was called the Vastu Sutra Upanishad. And my friend Bettina Baumer had just finished translating it from Sanskrit into English. And she showed me the book. Of course, she was very pleased with the manuscript. It was still manuscript. And I was amazed. I was amazed that in this 18th century text in the Vastu Shastras, which is called the Vastu Shastra Upanishad, there is almost a kind of resonance of what Raza was saying. Raza had never heard of it. We'd never spoken about it. I don't think he knew about the Vastu Sutra, this particular text. It had never been translated before. I just quote one thing. First, a circle is made. The circle is the all, universe. The breath of life is contained in its form, even as the mind is in man. The circle is time, according to the Vastu Vidya. The support of the circle is the immortal. The Bindu is in its firm position, like the Atman in man. That's all I want to say. I don't think we can forget that there's Islamic calligraphy, which is again visual abstraction, to help us contemplate the divine. In Islam, the cosmos is conceived as order and harmony, and this is best conveyed through the symmetry of geometry. Geometry, number, harmony are part of the objective language by several religions, used in the sacred art of Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Islam, Shintoism, Christianity somewhat, and Judaism. So I just want to end by saying that what I have tried to do is to unravel for myself and for us all, what did Raza mean by significant form? He really was trying to get to the essence, the purity of form itself. And I think he has laid the groundwork and the tradition, which he goes back, as I said, it's remarkable that it brought together a synthesis of what his best learning was from France and what was imbibed, what was learned actually when he was a child of 8. The Bindu was drawn for him. This is now a kind of a well-known thing. Mark was drawn on the wall for him, a Bindu, and it is now become kind of sacred to Raza's memory to remember this Bindu, which resurfaced many years later. But the Bindu has so many meanings, so many connotations, so much richness. How much could Raza explore? How much did he do? So much of it is evoked. And I think we should really try and see that this tradition is carried on. Thank you.
अच्छे दिन आ नहीं रहे हैं और अच्छे लोग हमारे बीच से उठ के ज़रूर जा रहे हैं। रजा साहब, मैं उतना खुश नसीब नहीं था जितना पहले जो लोग बोल के गए, बहुत उनके करीब रहे, पर उनके बर्ताव की, उनके बड़प्पन की जो आंच है, उसका थोड़ा बहुत ताप मेरी झोली में भी आया है। उनसे कई बार मिलने का मौका मिला। दिल्ली आने के बाद तो अशोक जी जब तब रजा फाउंडेशन के जो भी कार्यक्रम होते थे उसमें उनको बुलाते थे और काफ़ी समय तक वो उसमें शिरकत करते भी रहे। पर उनसे मुंबई में मैं मिला, मैंने उनको काम करते हुए देखा। 2 दफ़ा पेरिस में भी उनके घर गया, 1 दफ़ा मेरी बेटी भी साथ में थी। मुंबई में जिस घर में काम करते थे मैंने देखा कि जैसे पूजा करते हैं, इबादत के लिए पूजा घर में कोई दाखिल होता हो, इस तरह से बाहर अपने जूते उतार कर और वो अपना काम शुरू करते थे और कहते भी थे कि जो है कलाकर्म मेरे लिए पूजा की तरह है। पेरिस में का स्टूडियो, उसमें भी उनको काम करते देखा। जब मैं 1 दफ़ा गया तो अखिलेश भी वहाँ थे और जो मैंने कहा कि उनकी ऊष्मा का ताप मुझे मिला, मेरी झोली में गिरा, थोड़ा बहुत पैसा भी गिरा। पैसा इस मायने में कि उनकी उदारता की बहुत चर्चा लोगों ने की है। तो जब मैं उनके यहाँ गया, अशोक जी से तो उनका खैर काफ़ी घनिष्ठता थी ही, उनकी वजह से हमारी भी हुई, लेकिन ऐसी घनिष्ठता नहीं थी। पर जब भी हम भारतीय लोग विदेश जाते हैं तो पैसे का टोटा तो जेब में रहता ही है और उसका उनको शायद अंदाज़ा था। तो उन्होंने, जब मैं गया तब एक महिला भी वहाँ आई हुई थी, उनकी टैक्सी का किराया भी उन्होंने दिया। जब रवाना हो रही थी मुझे एक लिफाफा दिया जिसमें 200 यूरो थे, जो जाहिर है कि हम लोग जिस तरह से थोड़ा नखरा करते हैं, मैंने कहा नहीं मैं तो इसको नहीं छूता हूँ। तो उन्होंने कहा नहीं आप इसको रखिए। खैर इस बीच हम लोग बात करते रहे, अखिलेश वहाँ थे, कुछ तस्वीरें वगैरह ली, उनके स्टूडियो में गए। फिर उन्होंने मुझको कहा, एक बहुत बड़ा कैनवस पेंट कर रहे थे, तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये राजस्थान पर है। तो जाहिर है कि उसके रंगों से और उसका जो भी टेक्सचर था, तो उन्होंने कहा कि उनको आपको मालूम है कि अपनी कृतियों पर कविताओं की पंक्तियां लिखने का भी काफ़ी शौक था। कई कविताएं उन्होंने जो हैं अपनी कई कृतियों पर लिखी हैं। बहुत कम ऐसे चित्रकार हुए होंगे जिन्होंने इतनी कविताएं जो हैं अपने कैनवस पर एक एक पंक्ति लिखी हो। तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये राजस्थान पर है पेंटिंग, और मैं चाहता हूं कि राजस्थान की कोई पंक्ति ऐसी हो जिसका सीधा रिश्ता राजस्थान से हो। तो मैंने अपने दिमाग पे जोर डालना शुरू किया। हम लोगों के पास वक्त भी काफ़ी था, काफ़ी देर तक वहाँ रहे थे। तो मैंने उनको हमारे यहाँ कन्हैयालाल सेठिया की राजस्थान में एक पंक्ति है जो राजस्थान के लगभग कहना चाहिए कि राष्ट्रगीत की तरह, अगर राष्ट्रवादियों को इसमें आपत्ति न हो तो कहेंगे राजस्थान का राष्ट्रगीत वो है धरती धोरारी। धोरे हमारे यहाँ टीबों को बोलते हैं, सैंड ड्यून्स को। तो धरती धोरारी ऐसा करके। तो मैंने पूरी कविता उनको सुना दी। तो उन्होंने कहा धरती धोरारी, ये अपने आप में 3 पंक्तियां हैं, यही बहुत इनमें संगीत है, इनमें बहुत काव्य है। और बाद में वो कहीं अमेरिका वो पेंटिंग गई थी तो उस पर धरती धोरारी उन्होंने लिखा। और जब मैं रवाना हुआ तो खैर वो लिफाफे के लिए तो उन्होंने इंसिस्ट किया ही, जो मैं ले भी आया। मुझे लगता है कि वो शायद उन्होंने ये सोच के कि मेरे मन में एक गांठ उस लिफाफे को लेने से है, तो शायद उन्होंने ये कविता वाली बात भी सूझी हो। मैं काफ़ी सोचता रहा कि मुझे शायद इतना उन्हें अपराध बहुत दूर लगे कि हाँ मैंने कुछ उन्होंने मुझे कोई काम बताया और मैंने जो है ऐसा मैं सोचता रहा कि क्यों उनके दिमाग में अचानक ये बात आई कि राजस्थान की पंक्ति उस पर लिख दी जाए। बहरहाल मैंने उनके निधन के रोज एक छोटी सी श्रद्धांजलि लिखी थी। तो उसका यहाँ पे मैं पाठ तो नहीं करूँगा, पर उसका शीर्षक मैंने दिया था हिंदी के रजा। हिंदी से हमारे यहाँ बहुत से कलाकारों का रिश्ता रहा, हुसैन साहब से लेके जगदीश स्वामीनाथन जी से लेके, और हमारे यहाँ अखिलेश, मनीष पुष्कले, सीरज सक्सेना, बहुत से लोग सीधे सीधे हिंदी से जुड़े हुए हैं। रजा साहब चूँकि मध्य प्रदेश के थे, हिंदी तो उनकी अच्छी थी ही, उनकी लिखावट भी बहुत खूबसूरत थी। और अशोक जी ने जो किताब, बहुत अच्छी किताब लाइफ इन आर्ट उन पे तैयार की है, उसमें आपको उनकी उस लिखाई के नमूने काफ़ी मिल सकते हैं। एक डायरी वो लगातार लिखते थे, उसमें हिंदी और उर्दू के कई टुकड़े, कई कविताओं के टुकड़े, कई अंश वो लिख डालते थे और अपने अनुभव भी। वो डायरी मुझको पेरिस में देखने का मौका मिला अपनी आंख से, तो मैं कुछ 2-3 उसके अंश आपके सामने पढ़ देता हूँ। ये डायरी उन्होंने भोपाल में लिखी थी, जो उत्सव 1978 में हुआ था। युगल ध्रुपद गायन, जहीरुद्दीन और फैयाजुद्दीन डागर, आवाज़ का इतना विस्तार कभी न देखा था। यह मेरा पहला अनुभव था उत्सव में आनंदोत्सव। ये जो छोटे छोटे वाक्य, जो कि मैं हिंदी अखबार का संपादक भी रहा हूँ, मैं जानता हूँ कि अच्छा गद्य लिखना बहुत मुश्किल है, लेखकों से नहीं सकता है। और एक कलाकार जो हैं वो कितना सुंदर गद्य लिख रहे थे। दूसरा, डायरी के छोटे छोटे अंश हैं। मुझे कोई आपत्ति नहीं कि चित्रों पर बात की जाए, केवल मेरा यही अनुरोध है कि पहले चित्रों को देखा जाए। पहला स्पर्श, संपर्क, संयोग अपना निज हो। दर्शक और चित्र के बीच कोई अड़चन, कोई रुकावट, कोई दीवार, कोई माध्यम नहीं होना चाहिए। शब्दों से कितना कम और कितना अधिक कहा जा सकता है। जो सरल बातें मैं कठिनाई से कहता, दूसरे दिन बड़ी सरलता से पत्रकार कठिन हिंदी में कह डालते थे। मैं सोचता था काश मैं इस आसानी से लिख सकूं। फिर भी कठिन और सरल शब्दों का सवाल नहीं है, सवाल अर्थ का है। अर्थ महत्वपूर्ण है, आग्रह, उद्देश्य और उसका अभिप्राय। भीमबेटका जाते हुए हरे खेतों, सुंदर पहाड़ियों की ओर देखकर मैं हर्ष से सोचता था कि कितनी संभावनाएं हमारे देश में, कितनी शक्तियां मौजूद हैं। हर जगह नए पत्ते और कलियां विकसित हो रही हैं। इनमें जीवन, प्राण हैं, ऊर्जा और स्वाभाविक वर्धन है। कठिनाई यही है कि नवयुवक इन स्वाभाविक शक्तियों से किसी हद तक पहुंच जाते हैं और फिर उसके आगे बढ़ना बहुत मुश्किल होता है। आर्थिक परिस्थितियों के कारण, साधन या उत्साह की कमी से, जो भी हो, आज आवश्यकता है इन्हें पल्लवित, उत्साहित और क्रियाशील किया जाए। ये कलाकार की हिंदी है। पीड़ा में जन्म लेते ही हमारी पहली चीख हमारा पहला शब्द होता है। बाद में हमने बोलना सीखा जीवन शक्तियों की प्रेरणाओं से। चेतना इतनी बढ़ी कि हमें हर समस्या को समझने और समझाने की जरूरत पड़ी। प्रश्न थे क्यों, किस लिए, किस तरह। शब्द और तर्क की धाराओं में हम खो गए पहली पीड़ा को भूलकर। चित्रकार जीवन या कलाकृतियों के आसपास ही बात कर पाता है। स्वाद, सुगंध, पीड़ा, आनंद समझाए नहीं जाते हैं, इनका अनुभव चाहिए। प्रेम माँ के हृदय में ही संचित है, आंखों में, हर क्रिया में, शब्दों की हर सीमा के बाहर। शब्द शब्द शब्द, कितने शब्द बोले जाते हैं, लिखे जाते हैं। हम थक गए हैं इन्हें पढ़कर, सुनकर। बुद्धि के असीम उपद्रव से परे हटकर कुछ दिनों ही, किसी समय तक कोई न बोले, कोई न लिखे, इसी इच्छा में कि दूर से अंधकार में छुपे हुए केंद्रों से नए शब्द उमड़ पड़े नए अर्थों के साथ। और अंत में एक कहीं संगोष्ठी में उन्होंने कुछ नोट्स लिए थे, लोग बोल रहे थे और उन्होंने लिखा। बड़ी सुंदर बातें कहीं कहीं उस दिन, चिड़िया और बच्चे के बारे में। चिड़िया जरूर आकाश के बारे में बात करती होगी। फिर आगे लिखा, आकाश में जन्म लेता है उसका प्रेम। आगे, एक आवाज दूसरी आवाज से कितनी अलग होती है। घर के बारे में सोचो तो मन मौसम की तरह हो जाता है, उनकी डायरी में कहीं लिखा है। बच्चे ने पैरों की उंगलियां पैरों से बड़ी बनाई। रोटी, उसके बारे में कविता करना हिमाकत की बात होगी और यह मैं नहीं करूंगा। मैं सिर्फ आपको आमंत्रित करूंगा कि आप आएं और मेरे साथ सीधे उस आग तक चलें जहां वह पक रही है। आप विश्वास करें, मैं कविता नहीं कर रहा, सिर्फ आग की ओर इशारा कर रहा हूं। और अंत में एक शब्द, मैंने उसी को लिया और पूरे उस दृश्य के विरुद्ध रख दिया। अब मैं आजाद था कहीं भी जाने के लिए। धन्यवाद।
बात करते हुए ऐसा लगता है कि चित्र से कितनी बातें कही जाती हैं। मैं मिला तो उनसे अशोक जी की वजह से, लेकिन फिर लगातार मिलते रहे। कई दफ़ा मैं उधर से होते हुए भी चला जाता था उनके घर पे, संजीव को फ़ोन करता था। कई दफ़ा ऐसा संजीव ने कहा मैं आ रहा हूँ, तब तक मैं पहुँच गया। एक दफ़ा मुझे याद है, उनको एक लेख पढ़कर मैंने सुनाया। जो लेख हमने दर्जा 11 में, वो हमारे पाठ्यक्रम में था, उसको पढ़ा था। अब तो खैर पाठ्यक्रम से ये सारे लेख गायब हो गए हैं। बालकृष्ण भट्ट का लेख था, कवि और चितेरे की डाणा मेड़ी। अब डाणा मेड़ी शब्द जो है हिंदी से गायब हो गया, बहुत सारे शब्द गायब हो गए। कई हिंदी के लेखकों और कवियों को भी डाणा मेड़ी का अर्थ नहीं पता होगा। रजा साहब को पता था। उस दिन सौभाग्य से अशोक जी नहीं थे, नहीं तो शायद हमको सुनाने भी न देते उनको। पढ़ के मैंने वो सुनाया उनको पूरा। तो उन्होंने कहा ये अद्भुत लेख, धीरे धीरे बोलते थे बात के दिनों में। तो ये मेरी नज़र से कैसे नहीं गुजरा। हमने कहा अब ये मेरा प्रिय लेख है, पता नहीं मुझसे गलती हो गई कि मैंने आपसे जिक्र नहीं किया। उस लेख का एक बहुत ही निहित अर्थ है कि कई मायनों में चित्रकार असल में रंगों का कवि होता है, और वह कविता जो उसको तूलिका से बनती है उसकी, वो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण और कालजयी होती है। जैसे रज़ा साहब की बहुत से रचनाएं हैं, कृतित्व उनका है। कई कई प्रसंग हैं, वो बहुत विस्तार से मैं कुछ नहीं कहना चाहता हूँ। एक बार मैंने संजीव को फ़ोन किया, रविवार था, कि मैं तो आना चाहता हूँ। तो बोली आज तो रज़ा साहब खाली नहीं है। तो हमने क्या हो गया, रविवार है कैसे? तो उनका नहीं, आज वो ज़रा उनका एक नियम होता है। तो क्या नियम? हाँ, तो संजीव ने बताया कि आज वो जाएंगे मंदिर, मस्जिद, गुरुद्वारा, गिरजाघर आदि आदि जाएंगे। तो आप ये सोचिए कि उनका एक अपना तरीका जो था सर्वधर्म समभाव का, वो हमारे जैसे नास्तिकों को भी सिखाते थे। तो ये जीवन जीने की जो अपनी शैली और अपने व्यवहार से समाज को एक संकेत देने की बात है, वो रज़ा साहब की जिंदगी में थी। मैं बस आखिरी बात कह के अपनी बात ख़त्म कर दूंगा, क्योंकि यहाँ बड़े बड़े चित्रकार लोग हैं जिनकी मैं बड़ी प्रतिष्ठा करता हूँ, जिनके साथ मुझे अवसर मिला है कुछ समय गुजारने का। हालांकि चित्रकारों में सिर्फ एक चित्रकार थे जिनसे मैं कह सकता हूँ कि मेरी बड़ी निकटता थी, और मेरे मित्र कमलेश की वजह से आरंभ हुआ, फिर अशोक जी की वजह से चला, भारत भवन से लेकर कहाँ कहाँ हम लोग साथ साथ नहीं घूमे, जगदीश स्वामीनाथन। वो निकटता, यहाँ तक कि मैं उनके बच्चों को भी जानता रहा, उनकी पत्नी को, सबको। तो उस तरह की निकटता रज़ा साहब से मेरी उस तरह नहीं रही, लेकिन एक लगातार मिलते रहे, बात करते रहे और रसरंजन भी करते रहे। अब वो एक घटना नहीं मुझे भूलती कि 5 वर्ष पूर्व वो मेरे निवास पर आए, और अब मैं कभी बताता भी नहीं कि कोई कब जन्मदिन होता है आदि आदि इत्यादि। तो मेरा जन्मदिन था और एक चित्र लेकर आए, उन्होंने मुझे वो दिया जो मेरे लिए जीवन का सबसे बड़ा उपहार है। वो आज भी मेरे उस ड्राइंग रूम में लगा हुआ है। 3-4 चित्रकारों ने मुझे चित्र दिए। मनीष पुष्कले ने दिया एक चित्र, जगदीश स्वामीनाथन ने 3 दिए थे, वो तीनों कोई न कोई लेके चला गया, मेरे पास नहीं बचे, क्योंकि मेरे पास कोई उस तरह का घर नहीं था तब। मैं अपने पास रखता था, कोई आया बोले तो बहुत अच्छा है, हम रख लेते हैं, फिर दे देंगे आपको। तो देना किसको होता है, कौन देता है? पुस्तक ले गया तो नहीं देता, चित्र कौन देगा? तो ये अब रज़ा साहब आए वो चित्र लेकर के। उस दिन उनकी तबीयत भी ज़्यादा ठीक नहीं थी, तो लेकिन फिर भी बैठे, वो घंटे भर बैठे और उन्होंने सब बातचीत होती रही। चलते चलाते मैंने कहा देखिए आपकी तबीयत ठीक नहीं है, ज़्यादा देर मत बैठिए, आप चलिए घर। तो फिर उन्होंने, वो मुझे नहीं भूलता कि मुझे इस तरह से 3 बार थपथपाया और कहा मुबारक हो।
I also have a slight bad throat. I hope you'd bear with me. I was in the Foreign Service and I was posted to Paris in 1962. I met Raza Saab, my wife and I met Raza Saab in early 1963. I met him at the ambassador's house. The ambassador at that time was Nawab Ali Yawar Jung, you may have heard of his name. And I could see that he was very much inclined towards India. His heart was in India, though he was living in France. Because he was the one artist who was constantly meeting embassy people. I mean, for instance, I never met Akbar Padamsi ever, although he was living in Paris. But we met Raza Saab and we became very good friends. I must tell you something about his wife Yaneen, because a lot of people have spoken about Raza Saab. but she was the driving force behind him. And she was absolutely charming and equally generous. I mean, they had a little place in the country and they would invite us whenever we were free. And she would cook for us. And she loved to speak French. She preferred to speak French. And as I was learning French, I had been sent to Paris to learn French. My French wasn't bad, so she and I used to have long talks on all kinds of subjects, Catholicism, Indian, Hindu religions, various things. And she was really, and she also was a artist of some kind. She used to do collages and sculptures. In fact, she gave us 2 collages as presents. One was a large one and one was a small one. The large one unfortunately didn't last out in the conditions, weather conditions of Indonesia, and started peeling off, so we had to have it restored. It was not in very good condition. But she was an artist and a good one at that. When I saw, I think Raza Saab changed a lot after she died in 2002. When I met him in 2005, he was very different. He was a different man. He wasn't the same Raza. And you know, then of course when we were there in 62 to 65, he was living in a small flat. He didn't have that much money, but what I saw on NDTV yesterday, that big flat, I went to his large flat in 2005 when I went to Paris, and he also had a section of Janine's paintings and sculptures there. And but you know, the main thing was that he was really at heart an Indian. He really liked India, and he kept in touch with the embassy people. The other issue was that we found him to be very vivant. He was a different man in 62, 63. He was what you call in French a vivant, you know. He took us to places like Les Halles. I don't know whether you know that in Paris, but it's the only place which is open the whole night, because the butchers are there and the truck drivers are there. But the food there is pretty good, very good in fact. And we used to go there at 2, 3 in the morning. So you can imagine the kind of, I mean, he was full of life at that time. Not so serious when I met him in 2005. And but I must say he was very fond of wine. I mean, most Indians like whiskey, so I was a Scotch drinker. And so he said, why don't you try wine? I said, I'll try it. Now the interesting part is that in France, twice a year, President de Gaulle used to have a reception, and the mayor of Paris used to have a reception. Now neither of them served whiskey; they only served French cognac and French wines. So on one of the mayors, I met Raza Saab, of course. De Gaulle's, it was not may have been invited later, but not at that time. And he said, "Why don't you try some wine?" Because there was no Scotch. I did, and then I took up to wine quite seriously. So the other thing is that I'm so glad he was really honored by both India and France. I think it's important that he was honored by the French, because he had lived his life there. Once he took me to his gallery, the gallery where kept his paintings and sold them. The lady was Jewish, and she was very Jewish about giving him money. So the only regret I have is there was a Picasso lying there for 6,000 rupees. Can you imagine, a canvas? And I didn't pick it up. But never mind, Raza Saab gave us 2 paintings. But that time the Bindu was not in force. It was a different kind of, it was abstract art, but of a different kind. And we still cherish it. And last but not the least, I must thank both Sanjeev and Ashok for looking after him so well. During his last days, I was continuously in touch with Sanjeev, asking him how he was, and should I go and visit him in the hospital. He just discouraged me from going to visit him in the hospital. But he did tell me he was okay till the final. Then he said he's unconscious, can't be seen. But I assure you, he was a good friend. And as I said, we've known him since, and we went out to his little place in the countryside quite often. He had a little place at that time, not the one you saw on NDTV. Did you see the NDTV show yesterday, which showed the whole flat and the country house. Well, that time he had a very small country house where I said Janine used to cook for us. And but now he had a very large flat along with a section of Janine, I think 2 flats. In one flat he was living where he was doing his work and painting, and the other one was where he had kept Janine's sculptures, collages, and some of his painting. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Well, on 23rd July, when Raza passed away, I received a letter from the President of India, which I think will be appropriate to read out. I am sad to learn about the passing away of veteran artist Shri S.H. Raza. In his death, the nation has lost a highly creative and acclaimed artist. Shri Raza's contribution to Indian arts was recognized through a number of awards, including Lalit Kala Academy Fellowship, Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and Padma Vibhushan. His death leaves a void in the world of art and creativity which will be difficult to fill. I convey my heartfelt condolences to his friends and friends. I pray for peace of the departed soul. Pranav Mukherjee. Friends, before we come to a close, Raza, as you know, created Bharat Bhavan, and he created created Raza Foundation, and he created Raza Foundation for others. And in keeping with his generosity, his concerns for the young, we would try to do things and keep on the vision alive. We would hold a major exhibition of Indian art every 2 years, keeping in mind his concerns. We'll have 2 shows every year of young artists, one selected by an artist and the other one selected by a curator. We are starting a festival of young performers of classical music and classical dance. We hope to organize a Raza Festival of World Poetry, taking into account his deep interest in poetry. He very much wanted to help students. So we have a scheme now to give Raza scholarships in some of the more important institutions of art. Unfortunately, some of the institutions are in steep decline, so we do not know where to pick up, but then we are making that effort. And in any case, we will continue the effort to keep the vision of Raza, which is a very noble vision, a civilizing and humanizing vision. It was a vision which took others into account while sticking and rooted in oneself. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I must mention this, that it was Sanjeev Chaubey, my colleague, and some others who looked after Raza Sahab very, very, and if he lived for so long, it was because of that. I personally had never visited a hospital so many times in my life as I did this time. It was more than 130 times. But he deserved this attention because he was a great friend, a great human being. Raza Sahab in Gorbio, in the church yesterday, there have been condolence meetings in Bhopal, in Indore, in Bangalore. Tomorrow I'm going to Bombay, where there's a condolence meeting in the Jahangir Art Gallery. It is a nice feeling that a great artist is being mourned so widely. Thank you.